Welcome back to the Astrocast. I'm your host, Rue. Today is Tuesday, April 15th, 2025. The full moon has come and gone. The pink moon, as I've seen it called and photoshopped about 1,000 times since last week. How about you guys? Seen a lot of unnaturally pink moons in your social media feeds as of late? I know that I certainly have. Thank you so much for joining this week. My name is Rue. I'm your host. It's been a couple of weeks. Thank you guys so much for your patience. Life happens, yada, yada, yada. We don't need to get into it, but we're back and intend to stay that way. So we got quite a few things to cover today. I don't even know where to start. So many exciting things have happened. I guess I can start with the fact that I was outside imaging last night and it was very windy out. Windy enough to where normally under those kinds of circumstances, I would not even bother imaging. I mean, it was that bad. But I will say, with my peer, I was at no more than 1 arc second at any time while guiding. I mean, it was phenomenal. I'm talking like audible gusts of wind. Now I'm positioned in a place in my yard that is, very strategic because my fence surrounds the pier. So that blocks out a lot of the wind, which obviously tends to swirl in from different directions. So I'm very happy about that. That certainly has worked out extremely well. So if you are still on the fence and thinking about whether or not you want to make your own pier, I can tell you, I highly, highly encourage you to do that. Just make sure you do your research. Make sure that you have a good plan in place ahead of time. Make sure that you got a couple of buddies that can help you if you can. I couldn't imagine doing that by myself. But if you're interested in hearing more about that, we put out the episode Peers for Fears a couple of weeks ago, and you can certainly check that out. Other than that, oh man, we still got a lot of other fun stuff to talk about. How about the fact that the Astrocast officially has merch? So if you are a part of the members only Patreon, you probably already know. Thank you guys so much for your support. If you'd like to join that group, and we will be talking about that group a little bit more this week than we have in other weeks, because there's quite a few things I want to tell you about that have been going on. But if you'd like to get your own Astrocast shirt, you can now do that. Just visit qcroo.com/store. I've tried to keep the price as affordable as possible. Just trying to make sure that everybody can get one that wants one. I did a lot of work to make sure that we would have international shipping available because we have a ton of different listeners all around the globe. And obviously it's very important to me and frankly, just awesome that we're going to have Astrocast shirts out in places like Belgium. So shout out to everybody who is already placed in order. I'm kind of blown away by the response. I didn't really think that I would get too many, but wow, we got 4 immediately, like as soon as I announced it. So really, really cool stuff there. The plan long-term is to hopefully do like 1 drop per quarter. I think I've got a pretty good provider in place now that is, making quality products. I'd love to hear back from you guys. If you do happen to order something, please, tag me on Instagram, hashtag the Astrocast, or you can @ me. And I would love, love, love to see them out in the field. In fact, if one of you guys does that and tags me with it, maybe I can send you something special. So please do that. Keep me updated. If you have any questions, you, of course, can email me at rueastrocast.com. Sorry, that's rueastrocast@gmail.com. I kind of just rambled that on. I need to get the domain set up to the email. I own my own domain, which is qcroo.com. I'm considering getting a secondary domain for the Astrocast. I haven't really had a need for it yet, given everything that's been going on. There's just not really a need for it. So for now, I'm happy with the Gmail. But, as things grow, obviously, I'll probably change that to a custom domain. So earlier I mentioned the Patreon group. So we have a Discord called the Astrocast Society. And within it is a group of great people that talks each and every single day about all things astronomy, astrophotography, and just life in general. We've all become friends in there. Everybody adds their own unique flair to the group. And I just want to invite anyone who would like to join that group to come along. It's actually really, really great in our Discord. And I'm kind of blown away by how awesome of a community we have built there. Last weekend, for example, we have a user by the name of Kelly, and she has a really cool setup. She's got kind of like the dream astrophotographer setup for a wide field. She's got a Star Adventure GTI, a Red Cat 51, and an ASI 585 MC Pro, along with auto guiding and pretty much all the bells and whistles. She doesn't have an autofocuser yet, but I think I may have convinced her to get one. Her poor husband's probably going to kill me if she's got a very supportive husband, and she also, obviously has her own money. But in any case, I don't need to get into marital issues, but she needed some help setting up and kind of just understanding a little bit more about certain principles. So I can completely understand that. When I first got started and I was not a member of an astronomy club, I really struggled with understanding what the heck people were talking about. I remember how confused I was when I first heard the term polar alignment. And I remember, when I got my first telescope, when you go online and read, they talk about things like the home position and the zero position, and none of it really made sense to me. Obviously things ended up working out, but not because it was super easy. It took me a ton of trial and error. I can't tell you how many nights I spent out in that church parking lot with my Rebel T3 and SV Boney 80 millimeter doublet scope, just trying to figure out the basics. Now, I'm happy that it ended up being that way for me, because I feel like a lot of that self-learning and improvement within myself is what kind of prepared me for hosting the Astrocast. Without that knowledge, obviously, I probably wouldn't be here. But I completely understand that not everybody has the time to just dump an infinite amount of time into this, hoping for the best results. And, some people are, the point of the situation is that Kelly needed help, and she does not have a local astronomy club that she can join. So she told us, she said, you guys, referring to the Discord group, are my astronomy club. And that meant a lot to me because you guys know me. I am constantly preaching on the show about how important it is to join your local astronomy club if you have one. Unfortunately for Kelly, she lives in an area where there just is not an astronomy club, within driving distance anyway. So, she goes out and sets up and she does her best. But, when questions come up out in the field with spotty internet connection and all that, it can be difficult to deal with. And while there are a ton of videos out there, there's something special about having somebody actually, hands-on assist you that makes learning a lot easier, because when you have questions that pop up, having someone there to answer them for you just makes all the difference in the world. So what we did on Saturday night, it was around 10:30 p.m. Eastern time, which was, I believe, 9:30 p.m. For her. And her husband had set up out in the field. They brought their dog Scooter along, and we hopped on a video chat. And another member of the group, Nathan, joined us, and the three of us sat there for about 2 hours going through top to bottom everything that she needed to know. Now, I don't think she's going to retain all of that information, but I think that she learned a lot more in that 2 hours than she would have by, searching an infinite number of YouTube videos at home without her gear set up. So, just a little benefit. We are planning on doing more sessions like that in the future. And another really cool thing that we are starting in the group is a data sharing project. So one of our members, Mark, actually had a idea to set up a repository for data files. And the idea is basically all of us can share our data with one another. So maybe if there's a target that you can't get in your particular part of the night sky, perhaps I can, or perhaps Mark can. And then if we upload that data to the shared repository, you can go ahead and process it. So you know, may or may not be interested in that, but I can tell you that, Mark just came back from an awesome trip down in the Southern Hemisphere. I'm actually planning on talking to him on the show in a few weeks about that trip. But he brought back some data that you would not be able to get in the Northern Hemisphere. So that'll just be an extra benefit for members as time moves on. It's still very early in the process. I'm not trying to tell you that, if you jump in today, you're going to find a ton of files in there, but it's something we're doing together as a community. Now, there's, a little bit of, I wouldn't say legalese, but we got to figure out the details of it, like who owns the data afterwards, for example. My thought is, any data that you give to the group, essentially you're saying it belongs to the group. So as long as no one's turning around and trying to sell it as their own photo that they took, I don't have a problem with it. And I'll share all my data with, anybody who wants to process it. So that's another cool thing about it. So just a lot going on in the Discord. So I just highly encourage you guys, if you want to join, patreon.com/the Astrocast, you can join for as little as $1 a month. $5 a month is the recommended monthly amount. And we might do higher tiers in the future if somebody wants to give more. But I just wanted to update you guys on that because it was really cool. And like I say, at the end of the night, Kelly had gone from an unbalanced scope that was not calibrated for guiding. The guide scope was out of focus. The main scope was out of focus. And several of the settings within her ASI Air were not correct. And we systematically went through each and every layer of the ASI Air with her and showed her exactly how it works. Now, the next session that we have is going to be on the plan section of the tool because, like me, she uses the live stack function a lot. I love live stacking on the ASI Air because it's fun to watch the data come in and you can save all the individual frames. The only downside that Nathan actually pointed out on the call is that meridian flips aren't automatic if you're doing that live stacking mode. So you got to be careful with that within the ASI Air because you don't want to get to the meridian and then have your counterweights be above your scope. That's a very dangerous situation. So, but that said, if your target's 45 degrees in the air and it's 3 hours before it's going to hit meridian, then it's absolutely fine to go ahead and give it a try. So yeah, the Discord and Patreon are doing very well. We've got our first merch launch. In case you're curious, it's a t-shirt. It's a really cool t-shirt. It has the Astrocast logo on the front chest area on the left-hand side of the shirt. And then on the back, there is actually a quote from the show's mascot, Captain Cumulus, of course. And I'll let you check it out. It's a pretty funny quote. I love it. But check it out. The link will obviously be in the show notes for anybody who is interested. Man, it feels good to be back on the mic. It feels like it's been 2 years, even though it's only been 2 weeks. I hate missing a week, but we had to last week because we got all this stuff going on in life. So a little personal update for you. Me and my wife are actually moving forward with adopting a child. So we have actually struggled with fertility issues throughout our marriage. And that has been really tough. It's also been eye-opening to find out how many couples struggle with fertility issues. It's actually 1 in 3 women have fertility issues when it comes to having a child, which was kind of a crazy statistic to learn. But, if you or your partner are also struggling with that, I just want you to know, I feel you. Jess feels you, and we're all in the same boat. But for us personally, we decided that we've waited long enough and we really want to grow our family. And, the way I look at it is once we adopt, 3 years down the road, it's going to make absolutely no difference to us. Our child is going to be our child regardless. So just wanted to update you guys on that. I don't try to bring up too much personal stuff on the show, but I felt that was an important one because that was a large reason why I missed last week, because we've been setting up legal appointments and all those sorts of things. So just a little update for you on Rue's personal life. You may also remember from a few weeks ago that I announced we now have a call-in line. So if you ever want to call and leave a question for the show, you can do that by dialing 866-4-ASK-RU. Gotta love that, right? 866-4-ASK-RU. That's the actual number is 866-427-5766. And we actually we got a message. So why don't we have a listen?
Greetings and salutations, Rue, and fellow Astrocasters around the world. This is Matt, also known as Astrocast around the verse. I have a question that stems from some research I was doing for using a one-shot color camera to image with hydrogen alpha, oxygen 3, and sulfur 2, oxygen 3 narrowband filters, and then processing them, in my case, using PixInsight, to end up with a merged SHO or Hubble palette image at the end. My question is, what's the correct way to reference what type of imaging or processing that is called? There's a lot of info out on the interwebs, and was just curious, maybe 2 dual narrowband, duo dual narrowband, SHO dual narrowband, 42. Maybe it's just another crisis in cosmology, but you get the picture. Appreciate you, Rue. Thanks for putting on the show and getting this wonderful group of good humans together. Clear skies to all. Astrocast out.
Astrocast, thank you so much for calling in and leaving a message. And wow, Matt, how about that? I didn't know you were a Matt. I've been going by Astrocast the whole time, and I have been wondering what your name is, but glad to know it's Matt. My actual name is Chris, though I will tell you, I hate the name Chris. So I much prefer if my family and friends call me Rue. The only time I go by Chris is when I'm at the office, and that is only because my hand is forced. I wouldn't be in the position I'm in today if I went in and said, hey guys, my name's Rue. I think they might look at me like a silly redneck, but excellent question. And, you know, I did do some research into this, as I'm betting you probably did too. And the most common response that I seem to get is that really it's semantics at this point, because a lot of people obviously say dual band narrow imaging or dual narrowband imaging. For me personally, if I was doing 3 or 4 narrowband wavelengths, I would say either tri-band or quad band imaging. There are different ways that you could go about saying that, certainly. You could call it a narrowband composite. You could call it 3-channel narrowband processing, 4-channel narrowband processing, the aforementioned SHO, HOO. You could even say custom palette, tri-narrowband blend, multi-narrowband blend, spectral channel composition. There are a lot of different ways to say it, but they really all mean the same. And what that is, obviously, is that you are combining multiple very narrow wavelengths of light into one final image. And obviously, the advantage of doing this for us is that if we can separate those specific wavelengths of light from all of the other wavelengths of light that are out there in our beautiful universe, it makes them much more visible to us as humans. So the photons are going to hit the sensor no matter what, but we can block out specific light wavelengths so they don't interfere with the image. Typically, the Hubble palette is the first one that comes to mind because it very famously took narrowband imaging to a very broad audience. And I feel like so many people, well, I know so many people don't understand what we're talking about when we say something like Hubble palette. And then they're like, you mean fake colors? And I don't look at it as fake colors at all. I look at it as assigning a color to a, specific band of light. So you can tell them apart, essentially, which is what we do when we combined those narrowband composites in something like PixInsight. So really, I don't think you were wrong with your guesses at all. I think 42 is probably just as good an answer as any of the others that we went through. But me personally, I probably would go with tri-band or quad band imaging. So other than the voicemails, there is another area that we have for getting Q&As, which is on the aforementioned Discord. And we have gotten quite a few good questions on there so far. But one came up today that I wanted to address in particular. Sorry, I was looking up to remember who posted it. Ben actually asked, what do I do about sensor tilt? And boy, oh boy, Ben, did you ask a mouthful with that one. Sensor tilt really is one of the most difficult things to deal with in astrophotography. Ask me how I know. I dealt with this nonstop on my initial build for the Rokinon 135 lens. And it was such a pain. And I didn't think I was going to be able to fix it because no matter what I did, including using a tilt plate adapter, which we'll get to in a few moments here, it just wasn't right. Now, it turns out specifically for the Rokinon 135 lens, the trouble was the bayonet, which is the piece that connects the lens to the camera, was actually sagging just a teeny tiny little bit. Because again, it's built to be put on a camera, not a telescope. And I think that was kind of what the whole issue was. Now, luckily for me, with that particular lens, First Light Optics, wonderful company based in the UK, they sell a specific M48 adapter for the Rokinon 135 lens. I ordered it from them after I found out it existed. And after I installed it, which was extremely simple, just 3 screws, Phillips head, my tilt issues went away 100%. Combining that along with an electronic autofocuser pretty much solved all my problems with the Rokinon lens. However, for Ben, unfortunately, his problem is not related to the Rokinon lens. He actually has an SV Bony 80ED, which is the same type of telescope that I have, the exact same model. And he has been dealing with it for quite some time, and I guess he's like me, probably at his wit's end. So you got a few suggestions, obviously, in the chat. Nathan had mentioned that there is a jig that is sold for about $300 that can help you identify where the tilt is so you can adjust. Now, I personally probably wouldn't go that route just because I wouldn't want to throw $300 at it hoping for the best. If you have PixInsight, there is a tool built into PixInsight that is called Aberration Inspector. That's included free with PixInsight. Obviously, PixInsight is not free, but if you use Aberration Inspector, it can tell you how much tilt is in which corner of your photo. And from that, you can make adjustments to the actual tilt plate, which we'll talk about in a moment, until your aberration gets low enough to where it's within, acceptable limits. Now, what's a tilt plate? Tilt plates are devices that you can purchase from a number of different manufacturers that essentially screw into your imaging train. The one that I own is by ZWO. I believe it's pretty inexpensive. I believe you can get one for about $30. And they make them for, generic M48 and M42 sizes. I would think most are probably M48 standard. And then obviously you can step down to M42 or step up as needed. And basically they have push-pull screws on them that you adjust with a like a jeweler's screwdriver, a really small screwdriver. And as you make tiny little adjustments to those screws, it either pushes in or pulls out whichever area you are adjusting. Now, that being said, if you have sag in your imaging train, you probably want to figure out what's causing it and try to fix that as best you can. I don't know everything that's in your imaging train, but like for me, I didn't have much on my ADED because I wasn't really using anything. Let me think. I had a, 1.25 inch filter, which I had adapted to a 2-inch filter using one of those little filter inserts that come with ZWO cameras. And I placed that right by the sensor. And then I pretty much just used standard M42 tube rings to get to the 52 millimeters of needed back focus. Now, I will tell you, I know a lot of ZWO cameras have built-in tilt sensors. I really wouldn't recommend doing that, though, because chances are it's not your actual sensor that is the problem, but, something in your imaging train that needs to be adjusted. And if you adjust your camera, you're adjusting that part permanently. Whereas if you get a tilt plate, you can adjust that to your heart's content, and you're not really going to mess anything up any more than it already is, right? Because if it's got tilt, it's got tilt, and it's going to make the stars look ugly no matter what you do. So I would probably start with a ZWO tilt plate adapter. I would definitely play around with that. You got to have a lot of patience. It does take some time to deal with one of those. Plan on spending a night under the stars, taking your camera off and putting it back on. If you see, what area you're having tilt in by just looking at one image that comes through on your tablet when you're imaging, if it's like the top right-hand corner, for example, and you can, match up your camera to a known target in the sky, where you can, match the orientation from what you're actually seeing to what's showing up on the camera screen, like the Pleiades, for example. Maybe, point your camera at the Pleiades and rotate the back of the telescope until it's correct with your eye. In other words, when you see the picture download, it looks on your tablet. It's in the same orientation as it is in the sky. And from there, you can make physical adjustments on that tilt plate, using those screws to push in or pull out. And you can find out whether you need to push in or pull out with something like the aforementioned aberration inspector. There's also another tool if you don't have access to PixInsight that you can use. It's CCD inspector. That's the name of it. It is a paid tool. Not sure how much it goes for. Let me check on that. Looks like it's about $150, so definitely not cheap, but what an astrophotography is. I will say it does look like they do offer a free trial on their website. So if you just need to correct one and when you're going to do it and request that trial in the appropriate time, then maybe you could make that work. So hopefully that helps a little bit to point you in at least somewhat of the right direction. So thanks so much. Keep at it. Don't give up. The SV Bony ADED is an excellent telescope. I love mine. I'm really kind of surprised that you have sag in yours, if that is indeed what it ends up being, because mine has been so solid. It's I hate to say that because I don't want to make you feel bad about your telescope, but yeah, definitely double check every component, make sure everything's tight. If you are using just simple extension tube rings, like I am on mine, maybe consider replacing them with a different set. You can get them, very inexpensive online. And if you can do that, maybe that would save you a whole lot of heartache. So just a few options to consider. Let me know how it ends up going. Speaking of pointing your telescope at the Pleiades, boy, oh boy, is Orion dropping fast now. You can't even see Orion after sundown with the trees where they are at my house anymore. We're definitely well into galaxy season, and we're staring down the barrel of nebula season. So, we just got past the full moon, and we are marching towards new moon. With each day that goes by, the moon is rising later and later in the northern hemisphere. And I just think this would be a good time to let everyone know, if you haven't seen the Milky Way yet, it's now going to be visible, around 4:00 in the morning. You can definitely see it if you're in dark enough skies. Now, keep in mind, the Milky Way can be viewed from Bortle 5 locations, but if you can get to a 3 or lower, it can be quite breathtaking. So if you haven't made a trip yet, as I am always encouraging all of you guys to do, this would be a good time to plan one. If you could go in a couple of weeks, somewhere dark for a night, you could potentially get a really, really good shot of something cool like, the Rho Ophiuchi nebula, which is my all-time favorite summertime nebula, and I think it always will be. And you really don't need too much. If you're willing to make a trip to a dark location, all you really need is a tripod and a camera. Don't get me wrong. It is great to have a star tracker, and you can take, long exposures that are tracked, and it'll save you, time, I suppose. But the reason I'm saying it that way is because the last time I went to a Bortle 1 site, my favorite shots ended up being the ones that were just straight off the camera that was on a tripod. So I was shooting, the Milky Way from a Bortle 1 location last summer, and I was just doing 5 to 15 second exposures depending on what the focal length was that I was using. So at that time, I was using the 24 millimeter to 70 millimeter Canon LRF lens. Boy, that's a mouthful. It's a f2.8 24 to 70 lens. I actually don't have that lens anymore, and I hate it because I love that lens, but I don't love it as much as I do my wildlife dream lens, which I now have. So may that 24 to 70 rest in peace. But I have plenty of great primes that are more than capable of taking an incredible Milky Way shot. So why don't we talk about that for a few minutes? Because we did have somebody else ask about basic astrophotography, and it's one of my personal favorite things to do. And I realize that it can be a little bit unintuitive if you've never done it before, and you might be out in the field wondering, like, what settings should I put my camera on? How should I deal with light pollution if I can't get to a dark area? I can tell you, in my experience, if you want to do astrophotography with just a camera and a tripod, you do yourself such a disservice by staying in an area that has a lot of light pollution. I've captured a few Milky Way photos from my front yard, which is a Bortle 7 location. And I'm telling you guys, it's going to be an 8 before long. Our light pollution is just getting really awful around here. I was driving home to my house after doing a night of astronomy, actually that Saturday night I was talking about earlier. And I was just, driving down the street 2:00 in the morning in the suburbs, and somebody's backyard had just the most obnoxious, incredibly bright blue LED lights, broadband LED, full spectrum lights, just burning my eyes out. I mean, it literally looked like one of those, giant monster trucks that we have here in America with the really bright LED lights. That's what it looked like, except there were about 6 of them, and they were all on the back porch of this guy's house. I just don't understand why that's necessary. If you have, neighbors with lights like that, maybe just talk to them and explain. Me personally, I'm actually going to start a little bit of a neighborhood group around here to try to encourage people to reduce light pollution. I'm decided I'm going to take it upon myself. I'm going to have a little mini star party. We had a lot of families with a lot of young children in this neighborhood. And I can remember as a kid, when I saw Saturn's rings for the first time through a basic telescope, that I think, God, I can't even remember whose telescope it was I was looking through. I do remember it being a really, really, like cheap refractor, like the Sears telescopes, if you will. But even with one of those back then, seeing Saturn was just so incredible to me. So that makes me want to break out my Newtonian scope, which is a 130 millimeter Newt Celestron with a powered, motorized alt-az mount so I can track objects and just, show kids Jupiter and different cool things that are in our night sky. Let them see them while we have another one imaging so I can show people nebula. And the idea will be to just, maybe put up a couple of flyers up front in the neighborhood and say, hey, we're having a dark skies party over new moon weekend. If you're interested, come to the end of the cul-de-sac, that sort of thing. And then while everyone's there, I can explain the importance of light pollution, not just for astronomy, but for wildlife. If you don't know, wildlife is greatly impacted by light pollution. Bird migrations in particular, which are starting to pick up big time right now, can be, hugely impacted by light pollution. But anyway, I say all that to tell you, drive out to some dark skies. That's the best thing you can do for yourself if you want to really do some great Milky Way photography. But we can talk about how to get through light pollution as well. All right, so let's start at the beginning. So as we've said, you're going to want to get far, far away from the city lights. So first, you can do this by looking up a dark sky location near you using lightpollutionmap.info. So go ahead and load up lightpollutionmap.info and find your home address and start searching around for different areas that are a lot darker than where you are if you're in like a general suburban neighborhood just outside the city. So our rule of thumb for light pollution map is going to be green is good, but blue is better. Gray is fantastic if you can find it, but very few places in the continental U.S. With true Bortle 1 skies, but they are out there. Most of them are out west. You can find quite a few out west, in fact, but most of them are in areas that require quite a bit of driving to get to if you fly out. Something that I'm actually thinking quite a bit about as of late, but we can talk about that at a later time. On the East Coast, your options are a bit more limited. Obviously, you have the coast. If you can find an area on the coast that is dark enough, and you're pointing, towards the south. I know, obviously, if you're on the East Coast, you're mainly facing east, but there are plenty of parts in North Carolina, South Carolina, even Florida, where you can face south if you get the right area near the beach. So that's one good way that you can do it. Some other areas along, the eastern coast would be West Virginia. They have some phenomenal areas. The Blue Ridge Mountains in general. Elevation is huge. If you can find a Bortle 3 site that is at really high elevation, I can tell you that personally, I think it looks better than Bortle 1 from a coastal location with poor seeing. So that's just my personal opinion. A lot of people might disagree, but that's what I think. So Pennsylvania, obviously, they also have quite a few awesome spots. Cherry Springs Park, obviously, is a beautiful place to check out astronomy. And then the further north you go from there, the more it opens up. But then you're getting close to Canada, Vermont, New Hampshire, that sort of way up there. There is some true Bortle 1 skies up in Maine, and actually some at high elevation too, if you're willing to search. So those are just a few of the hot spots, if you will, on the East Coast. Now, if you're on the West Coast, you have a lot more options. Honestly, most places on the West Coast that I'm seeing, within a day's drive, you can be in a Bortle 1 location. So, just think about it like that. Go for a weekend, leave on a Friday night or a Friday afternoon if you can, drive that night, and then you'll have all Saturday night's image and then come home on Sunday. So that's what I would do. Make sure you plan around new moon. This is another thing we haven't mentioned yet, but it has to be at new moon. The full moon, half moon, even quarter moon just completely destroys your ability to see the Milky Way. Now, that's not to say you couldn't photograph it, but for me, if I'm driving all the way to a dark sky location, I'm doing it during new moon. I wouldn't even consider going to a overnight dark sky location unless it's new moon. That's just me personally. So make sure you keep that in mind. If you're planning well in advance, have backup plans, because obviously we cannot control the weather. I've been known to just kind of drop everything and say, I'm hitting the road because it's going to be, clear weather on new moon, and hey, why not? So if you have the option to do that, great. All right. So we have dark skies, we have a new moon, and hopefully we have the Milky Way. Now, you don't have to go at the height of Milky Way season. I will tell you, it's, in my personal opinion, the best time to go. Though I will tell you, seeing the winter skies under Bortle 1 can be every bit as breathtaking as the summer skies in the Northern Hemisphere. So just keep that in mind. But it depends on what your target is. For me, I love shooting roe. So in a couple of weeks, when new moon rolls around and I know that roe is going to be up between 2 and 5 a.m., that's likely when I'm going to head a couple hours outside of the city to try to get to a Bortle 3 area so I can shoot that particular night sky object. All right, so we've talked about where to go. We've talked about when to go. Let's talk about what to bring. So obviously a camera, you're going to want multiple batteries, because you'll be surprised how quickly you can go through an entire battery when you're taking shot after shot after shot of the night sky. Now, whether or not you have multiple batteries, that varies. I can tell you can get third-party batteries on places like Amazon for relatively cheap. If you have a newer camera, a lot of times, like my Canon cameras can charge over USB-C. So I don't necessarily have to bring an extra battery if I have my big external battery, which can do, like 110 volts to various devices. That's the big battery that I bring with me when I go on my dark sky trip, so I can be sure that I can power my rig all night, whether there is local power or not. If you have a device like that, definitely bring it. Keep in mind, things like dew heaters take up a lot of power. Luckily, this time of year, we don't have to deal with dew quite as much, but, depending on when you go, you certainly could have to. So make sure you bring a lens warmer or a dew heater along with your camera and lens. The other thing you're going to need is a sturdy tripod. I can't say this enough. You have to have a good tripod. Like, don't get one of the reason I'm so adamant about this is because when I first got into photography, I bought so many cheap tripods that broke. I mean, I went into Best Buy and I bought I think it was called a Sun Pack, if I'm not mistaken, tripod. And I got it out and it was all plastic. And I was just like, this is all plastic. The adapter that came with it that you screw onto the bottom of your camera, like the plate that holds it on the tripod, was a proprietary size. So it wasn't like the universal Vixen mounts that we normally see. Oh no, it was some proprietary thing. So you could only use it with that specific crappy tripod. So buy yourself a decent tripod. I'm not saying you got to spend a fortune on it. You can get a great tripod for $50 on Amazon if you check reviews and shop around, but make sure that it can, sturdily hold your camera and that it's not going to break the first time that you use it. If you buy 3 cheap tripods that end up breaking in a 6-month period, you would have been better off buying one decent one. So save yourself the money. I would think most astronomers are fans of the buy once, cry once method, which says to spend your money up front. Even though it might cost you a little bit more, in the long run, you will save. Not only will you save money, but you will save sanity. On top of that, you'll want to have a decent ball head. A ball head is very important because that is what allows you to point your camera at any part of the night sky that you would like to. Also ball heads are somewhere where I spend a little bit of money. Because if you look at cheaper ball heads, you'll see that they say they're rated to hold 22 pounds. But I tell you, I wouldn't put my Canon R5 with a $2,500 lens on top of one of those $20 ball heads that supposedly can hold 22 pounds. No way. So lots of reputable places, High Point Scientific, B&H Photo, Adorama, Gina Astro. We are partners with several of them. Check the show notes if you'd like to support the show. But get yourself a decent ball head and you will not regret it. A couple of quick mentions that aren't really 100% necessary for your trip, but they will make life so much better for you. I think I've mentioned these in the past, but now that we've done 50 something episodes, I think it's worth saying again. Get yourself a zero gravity chair. A zero gravity lawn chair is so nice for when you're out watching the stars. It is incredible to be able to lean straight back and have your head pointed up directly at the night sky without having to crick your neck all night. If and when you watch a meteor shower from a dark sky site, it'll pay for its weight in gold. I'm telling you, it's so nice to have. So bring comfortable chairs, bring blankets. Even though it is a warmer time of the year that we're getting into, it can certainly get chilly. I've been chilly on a July night in North Carolina. It does happen. So always bring blankets. It's okay if you don't need them. But if you do, you'll be very, very happy that you have them. If you don't have blankets, just, bring a couple extra hoodies, that sort of thing. And pro tip for you, use Google Maps in combination with Light Pollution Map and see if you can find an area that is far away from people, but has a wide open space from which you can image. I'm just going to say it. I've said it before. Graveyards are a great place to do astrophotography. They're public areas. It's generally not frowned upon if you're in one at night, as long as you're not causing trouble. And, as astronomers, we're generally pretty quiet because we're focused on our craft. You won't have anything to worry about. So be safe. Obviously, don't go to some dangerous area with your expensive camera and equipment and all that. Use your common sense. But I'm telling you that because I've had a lot of success in areas that are far away from home in a graveyard, because no one's going to mess with somebody in a graveyard. What are you, nuts? But they tend to have low tree lines because there are wide open spaces that have been cut out, specifically for that reason. So it gives you a wide open view of the night sky. And sometimes it can give you a really interesting foreground shot, which is something that can be hugely important in a Milky Way shot. So adding a foreground to your Milky Way takes it from oh, wow, that's cool, to, oh, wow, that's really cool type situation. I've taken a bunch of Milky Way photos in the past, but when I have a really cool foreground image, those are the ones that people tend to like a lot more than the others. All right. So when you get there, first of all, pull out all your gear, get it all set up your tripod, bring a headlamp. Having a basic red headlamp makes all the difference in the world, especially if you're in a strange place that you're not accustomed to. Red headlamp specifically because red will not impact your eyes as much as, a white light will. If all you have is a white light and you're not bringing other astronomers with you, then, feel free to bring it if you want. But if you got a red one, much, much better. I just bought a new one on Amazon this week for, I think, $8, and it's awesome. It's just a little stubby, rechargeable USB-C type flashlight with a really bright red light on it. So I'm just loving that. It can clip onto my hat too, if I want it to, which is nice. So just a couple of ideas for you, but definitely bring a light of some sort because you're going to be working in the dark and you need to be able to see from time to time. So after you get your car unpacked, bring out your battery if you have it, bring out all of the gear that you're planning on using for the night. I like to bring a small table with me, just a cheap $20 folding plastic table from Costco. That's what I always got. And then I bring 2 chairs. I bring my zero gravity chair, and then I bring just a cheap, camping folding chair, the kind that Bernie Sanders famously flipped out in that one meme. Just that kind of chair. I always bring one of those as well, because sometimes I just need to sit in a regular chair and, work on something like on a tablet or on the computer or what have you. And then other times I've got everything running great in the background and I want to, look up at the stars because that's what I'm there to do. And that's when I get in the zero gravity and relax. So after you are all unpacked and you've got the tripod fully set up, go ahead and break out your camera. Now, for lenses, there are a lot of different ways that you could go here. For me personally, I like to use a 16 millimeter prime lens when I'm doing Milky Way photography. That said, you could use a 24-70, like I talked about earlier. You could even use a 50 millimeter lens and get a pretty large portion of the Milky Way. The important part, though, is that you want to use the fastest lens that you have available to you. And when I say fastest, I mean the lowest aperture. So most 16 millimeter prime lenses, and prime just means that it only has one focal length. It's not a zoom lens that is adjustable. Like when I said the 24-70 earlier, what that means is you can adjust the zoom between 24 millimeters and 70 millimeters. Whereas a prime lens, it's just 16 millimeters or just 50 millimeters. And what it is what it is. The advantage is they're simpler because they don't have to have, moving parts and what have you to allow for that zoom. And therefore generally have brighter apertures, and they're not always cheaper. Depending on the type of lens that you're buying, primes can be very expensive, but there are usually, for most makers like Canon and Nikon and Sony, there are inexpensive 16 millimeters available. And in my case, I have the 16 millimeter f2.8 RF lens. Not the crazy L1. I'm trying to think, do they have an L16? They might not actually, but I've just got the f2.8 one that I think I picked up for about $200 on sale, if I'm not mistaken. Those prices probably are not the same now. I would bet it's at least $300 for that RF lens, but get the fastest lens that you have and the widest lens that you have. If you don't have a wide, fast lens, I can tell you TT Artisans make some really great prime lenses that are fast and great for astrophotography. I mean, I've talked about them on some of the earlier episodes of the show back in like the 10s and 20s, I think, but I love my TT Artisans lenses. I've got some really, really wide fisheye ones that are, I think it's like a 6 millimeter and an 11 millimeter or something along those lines, but they're super wide lenses and they let in a lot of light, and that's what you want ultimately for Milky Way photography. Now there is such a thing as too wide, I suppose you could say. Like my one TT Artisans lens that is the fisheye, I can capture with a full frame camera. I can get pretty much the entire night sky in that photo. That can be really cool. But a lot of your stars end up being just 1 pixel. If that, you might not even pick up some stuff because it's so wide, depends on what your resolution is. So, personally, if I had my choice, I would go with a 16 millimeter for most Milky Way shots. Now, while we're at it, why don't we talk briefly about full frame versus APS-C cameras? Because a lot of times people hear these things and they don't know. They hear full frame is better and APS-C is worse, and they want to know why. I don't personally feel like either one is better than the other, but rather they have different use cases. So a full frame is a larger sensor and an APS-C is just a slightly smaller sensor. And what that means for you in practice is that if you were to use the same lens with a full frame camera and a APS-C camera, the full frame camera would give you a wider field of view. The APS-C camera would give you a narrower field of view, but you would get the exact same photo. And what I mean by that is, since the sensor is larger on the full frame than it is on the APS-C sensor, it just basically allows a bigger picture to be captured. Now, the reason why you might want to go with an APS-C sensor over a full frame sensor is, well, A, they're usually less expensive than full frame, but B, you might want that extra bit of quote unquote reach. Now, you're not really getting extra reach because, as I said earlier, if you take a photo with that APS-C sensor and then use that exact same one on a full frame, the full frame will capture everything that your APS-C did and then add on an additional bit of picture around the edges because it's got a wider field of view. So basically, the only real difference is, one can gather more light because it's a bigger sensor. That's just physics. More photons can hit the sensor, therefore it's gathering more light. But the APS-C sensor is, very, very useful and very, very good. I have my Canon R7, which is an APS-C, and I love using it for wildlife because it gives me effectively more length than I would get with my full frame camera. Anyway, that's just a little bit of an aside, but back to shooting the Milky Way. So let's say that you've got a Canon camera like me, and you're using a 16 millimeter lens. Well, the first thing you're probably going to want to figure out is where is the Milky Way? Now, if you're in a really dark area like Bortle 3 or better, you should be able to see the Milky Way. If it is, new moon, and at this time of year, it would need to be about probably 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning. And you would want to look towards the south, the southern part of the sky. You should be able to see the Milky Way in the night sky. Now, as soon as you get there, it's probably just going to kind of appear cloudy. It's funny because most people that I talk to, they say when they first see the Milky Way, they thought it was clouds. And I got to tell you, I thought it was too. The first time that I saw it from my dark sky location, I said, what is that? Is that clouds? And then I realized, after half an hour that they weren't moving. And then my mind was blown when I realized it was the Milky Way. So if you're not sure where it is, there are a lot of different apps that you can use that will tell you exactly where the Milky Way is. And luckily, there's lots of great free apps that you can use. So I always recommend Sky Safari. Sky Safari is my personal favorite to use. It does have an augmented reality mode where you can point your camera at the night sky and it will tell you exactly what part of the sky you're looking at. So you'll be able to see, hey, there's the Milky Way when you're looking to the south. And it also lets you adjust the time. So like if you're going to a particular area for your dark sky trip and you want to plan in advance, you can put in the location and the date and time that you will be there, and then adjust the time by the hour until you see that the Milky Way has risen. Again, shortly after 2 a.m., it starts coming up over the horizon, and by 4 a.m., it should be pretty darn visible. So that's what I'm going to be doing. I'm going to be shooting RAW like that in a couple of weeks. But anyway, some other notable apps, Photo Pills. I own this one. I have yet to really use it and or master it. It does have a lot of really, really cool features. And I get the feeling if I spent some time with that app, it could probably teach me a thing or two. Obviously, Stellarium is a great application. I like to use that one at home on my PC. I'm not a big fan of the mobile Stellarium app. For that, I would just rather use Sky Safari. All right, so we're at our location. We have located the Milky Way, or at least located the area where it is supposed to be. And now we need to take a picture, right? So we need to set the settings for our camera manually so we can make sure that it's basically taking a photo that will actually show the Milky Way to us. So we said earlier that we want to use as wide of a lens as possible. And that is true. Like the 16 millimeter that I'm talking about is f2.8. Now, that being said, I would personally manually adjust that aperture slightly down. We call that stopping it down. And that is basically just closing that aperture a little bit. Depending on the camera that you're using, you can, oftentimes rotate a ring on the outside of the lens. If it's like a control ring, you can set it to adjust the aperture, or you can do it within the menu of the camera itself, adjust the aperture. And the reason that you want to stop down a lot of lenses a little bit is because it can make the stars appear much sharper. And that's really important in a Milky Way photo. If you've got something as wide as 16 millimeters on a full frame camera, for example, and your stars are appearing bloated, that can really ruin the photo. So stopping it down to, let's say, f3.5 instead of 2.8, if that sharpens up the stars a great deal, to me, that's a much bigger benefit than the one stop of light that I have lost by stopping the lens down. So, look at your camera and find out how to adjust the aperture. It'll vary from camera to camera, but it's pretty easy on the Canon R7 and R5, just on the back of the screen. When you're in any manual mode, you can tap right where it says f2.8 and then drag on the touchscreen to adjust where you want to be. Now, you got two other settings that you're going to need to adjust. And while we're at it, why don't we talk about custom modes? So it's going to vary from camera to camera. For Canon, the custom modes are C1, C2, C3, and sometimes more depending on the camera that you get. Some just have 2, some have 1, some have 3, some have 4. But if you have C and then a number on your Canon camera, that is a custom shooting mode where you can save custom settings to it so you don't have to constantly adjust those settings while you're out in the field. This can be a huge time saver for you and frustration saver. If, for example, you are in manual mode and then you adjust everything. Let's say you set it to f3.5, ISO 1600, and then a 10-second exposure, and then you walk away from your camera for a few minutes, and it times out and goes to sleep. When you wake it back up, you might find that the settings have reset to what the default is. And the way you can avoid that is by manually setting them and then saving those settings to your custom mode. So in a Canon camera, what you'll want to do is put the mode dial to M or manual, and then you'll want to set all of the settings individually. So like, for example, if I was using a 16 millimeter lens, I might start with, a 6-second exposure at ISO 1600, maybe 3200, depending on the camera, maybe even 6400, but probably not that high. For me, 1600 or 3200, and then f3.5. Now, once I've done that, if I just set my camera down and walk away, unfortunately, what's going to happen is it will go to sleep. And then when I wake it back up, it's going to say 1/1000th of a second at f2.8, and the ISO is automatic. I don't want that. So what I will do is I will press the menu button, and I will go over to the wrench icon on my Canon camera, and I will scroll all the way over until I find custom shooting mode. It says C1 through C3 in parentheses, and then you hit register settings, and it asks you which button you want to register it to on the dial. I'll select C1, and then it will save it. So do that with at least your base settings. And if you want, you can, adjust the time more, adjust the ISO more, adjust the f-stop more if you'd like to. And then you can always update it again. But the advantage is if and when the camera goes to sleep, you're not going to have to worry about resetting all of those things back to the beginning. So it can save you a lot of time and frustration, something I was thrilled to learn how to do when I learned it. Now, how long can you take a shot without a star tracker, without having star trails? Star trails are when you have taken an exposure that is so long that the stars have actually moved while you were exposing, and you end up with blurry looking stars. Now, if you want, you can continue to expose for even longer and then take that same image over and over again. And that's how you get a star trails photo. A lot of people will point their camera directly at the North Star, for example, because that gives you a central focal point that does not move much. So it's very pleasing to the eye to have all those circles come out. But you can do it anywhere in the night sky and get star trails if you want to do that. But for our purposes in Milky Way, we don't want star trails. We want nice, sharp stars. So what we do is we invoke something called the 500 rule. And that tells us that 500 divided by the focal length of the camera equals your max shutter speed in seconds. Now, the 500 rule is for a full frame camera. you use the 300 rule for an APS-C camera. So if you've got the slightly smaller sensor, you want to go with the 300 rule. Full frame, go with the 500 rule. So again, that's 500 for full frame or 300 for APS-C divided by the focal length equals your max shutter speed. So let's take my R5 and R7 for example here, because that's both a full frame and an APS-C camera. So if I'm doing on the full frame camera, I take 500 and divide that by 16, I get 31.25. So what that's saying is technically I could take an exposure that is 31 seconds long and I will not have to worry about any blurring or trailing stars in my image. Now, that 31 seconds is pretty bold. I don't know if I would do 31 seconds. The 500 rule is a rule of thumb. So you're always going to want to check the back of your camera, zoom way in on a bright star and a not so bright star, and look for yourself. It can be hard to tell in the field, and I always tend to play it safe. So even though it says 31.25, if I'm in a really dark area, I'm probably going to be happy with the 20-second exposure and knowing that I will have 0 star trail. So I tell you all that to say play it safe with these numbers. I always go conservative on the 500 rule because I had the first time I went on a true dark sky trip, I used the 500 rule, but I maxed it out and it was hard to tell on the back of the camera. The stars did not look terrible by any means. But when I got home and I was looking at all of the images on a 50-inch monitor, it became very apparent that those stars were all trailed. All my images ended up blurry and I really couldn't even use them. So I learned that lesson well for the next year when I went back. And that's when I started dialing back that exposure time a little bit from, 31 seconds to 20 seconds. So play around with it a little bit, make sure that you get to an area where you're certain that you're not getting any star trails and your stars look nice and sharp, and you should be in good shape. Now, for that R7 camera, if we were using it for the same situation, it changes quite a bit. Since the sensor is smaller, those stars technically move over the same amount of space faster, and we have a more zoomed in view technically. Well, not technically, comparatively speaking. So if we take that, it's the 300 rule again. So 300 divided by 16 is 18.75 seconds. For something like that, I'm probably going around 12 seconds, maybe 12 to 15. I might start at 15 seconds. And as long as I can see that the stars look really good and sharp, I'd be okay with that. But if I see any hint of trailing, then I'm backing that down to 12. So the 500 rule and the 300 rule, easiest thing to remember, 500 divided by focal length equals how long you can expose for. Or if it's an APS-C sensor, 300 divided by focal length equals how long you can expose for. Now, when you're using a 16 millimeter lens, you're like, well, God, I got 30 seconds. I'm good to go, right? But this changes a lot if you're using a lens with a slightly longer focal length. So we had 31 seconds earlier on the 16 with the full frame, but let's say I'm using the R7, which is an APS-C sensor. And let's say I don't want to use my 16 millimeter lens. Let's say I got a nifty 50, as we call them, a 50 millimeter prime lens. Maybe I'm doing that because it's even brighter. Maybe I got like a f1.8 50 millimeter lens and I want to use that. Well, if we take 300 and divide that by 50, obviously that's only 6. So you go from something like, nearly 30 seconds at full frame with a 16 millimeter lens to just 6 seconds with a 50 millimeter lens. So it's really important to pay attention to. And I'm stressing this a lot because, again, the first time I made a dark sky trip specifically for these photos, I messed them all up because I believed in that rule too much and I didn't play it conservatively. And I really wished I would have, because I missed out on some really, really awesome shots that night because of it. I don't want that to happen to you guys. So, make sure you review your images before you kind of set it and forget it for the night. Now, another thing that you're going to want to do is turn on the probably 2-second delay timer. Most cameras have a timed delay that you can turn on in the settings. For Canon, you can choose 2 seconds or 10 seconds. I just want to press that shutter button and then be able to move my hand away without vibrating the camera. Because when you're taking long exposures, particularly something like 6 to 30 seconds long, depending on what you're shooting, just a little bit of touching that sensor can really wobble those stars and ruin the image. So by using a timer, we ensure that we are not physically touching the camera when it begins exposing. Some people will even turn on their electronic shutter mode on their camera when imaging, dark sky sight, because they don't even want the mechanical shutter that closes and opens when a photo is taken to be used. So modern mirrorless cameras have, electronic shutters built in where you don't even have to use the, mechanical shutter. Now there's disadvantages to doing that with terrestrial shooting. There's, warped images happen when you're using an electronic shutter instead of a mechanical, but for deep space, no problem at all. You can use the electronic shutter, but that's not hugely important. I would say I don't think most cameras vibrate too much just by the clicking of the shutter, but definitely find that timer, turn it on to 2 seconds or 10 seconds. And when you're taking your test images, make sure that you've done that. Now, after you are, confident with your timing, like I say, ISO, I would start at 1600, maybe start at 3200, and then adjust it as needed. Like I say, if you're in a really dark area and you're at 3200 ISO, 6 seconds, f2.8, you're going to see that Milky Way pop right out as soon as that first image comes down. We've been talking about all the settings. I forgot to mention focusing. So focusing is obviously very important. I've had complete batches of mirrorless photos ruined due to bad focus as well. You can use a Bahtinov mask for focusing, which is something that you can pick up online for very cheap. But honestly, I don't really feel it necessary to use a Bahtinov mask when I'm doing Milky Way photography. If I'm doing something really wide, I can look at the back of the screen, zoom in, using the magnifying glass option on the back of the Canon camera. Nikons also have something similar, but zoom in on the stars and then, manually adjust the focus on the camera lens until the stars are as small as possible. Now, I will say if you're using a newer camera, a lot of them are so autofocus centric that you have to go into the menus and actually manually turn on manual focus. I definitely have to do that for my Canon cameras, but it's on the very first screen of the autofocus screen. You can set the focus mode from autofocus to manual focus. After you do that, like we talked about earlier, make sure you register that to your custom shooting mode, C1, C2, C3, etc., like we were talking about. And that way, when you're on C1, for example, it will always know to do manual focus, because it can be really annoying when it's trying to do autofocus on stars that are very dark and it can't find something to lock onto. So just something to consider. Something else worth mentioning that came up as a question in the Discord, specifically about mirrorless and DSLR night sky photography, was asked, what is an Astro modified camera? This is a really great question. A lot of people will Astro modify their own DSLR or mirrorless cameras. There are also lots of services out there that you can send your camera into and they will actually do it for you for a price. And there is a very good reason why we astronomers and astrophotographers do that. So inside pretty much every camera that is out there in the consumer market, your Canons, Nikons, Fujis, etc., Sonys, there is something in front of the sensor that is called an IR cut filter. And that IR obviously stands for infrared. So an infrared cut filter, and its whole job is to block out unwanted infrared light and even some of the deep red light that is in the visual spectrum. And basically all that does is it makes everyday photos look a little bit more natural. But unfortunately, what it also does is it blocks out a lot of light in the hydrogen alpha area of the light spectrum. And that is, again, the most emitted light by all nebula in our universe. Hydrogen obviously is the most abundant element in our universe, and all the nebula tend to emit it. So by removing that infrared cut filter, our cameras are able to absorb a lot more of that red light. And the difference really is night and day with most cameras. By the time you get an Astro modified camera back, it makes all the difference in the world. So I'm actually going to be doing it with my Canon R5. I love my Canon R5, but I found a company that will do it for me, and they have a pop-in filter that I can just clip right in front of the sensor when I'm wanting to do regular daytime photography, and it will return it to its normal state. So I'm not really losing anything, but I am gaining the ability to get all that beautiful red nebulosity in the night sky using my favorite camera. So that is a win-win. Now, that being said, I will say you don't need an Astro modified camera to get great Milky Way photos. My cameras aren't Astro modified, and I got phenomenal photos a couple summers ago on my last deep sky trip out to the coast. So yeah, it's not 100% necessary. I will say if you're planning on using your DSLR or mirrorless camera on your actual telescope, so, if you're going for, wide field nebula, those sorts of things, I probably would recommend it at that point, because you're just zooming your view in a lot more than something like a Milky Way wide field shot where the light is so much brighter. But if you're going for, specific nebulae and you're wanting to use a mirrorless or DSLR camera, you're doing yourself a disservice by not having that IR cut filter removed, because it blocks out so much of the light that you would like to get. So after you're fully focused and you've done your exposure time correctly, so like I said, 300 rule or 500 rule, calculate it, take a couple of seconds off, make sure that you're focused, set your ISO to 1600 or 3200, and then set your aperture just slightly stop down, and you should pretty easily be able to see that the stars are sharper, even if you just take one picture with and without the lens stop down. And then essentially it's just a matter of rinse and repeat. So if you want to take, 100 10-second exposures with your 16 millimeter lens, you can then take those exposures and stack them together. You could even create a time lapse, which is something that I love to do with the Milky Way, so you can see it slowly moving over your head. You can also combine it with foreground images, which you can take, a little bit earlier in the night or at the end of the night if you want to. Basically, you just focus your camera on the foreground, as the name implies, stop it down a little bit so you can sharpen up that image. And a lot of people will do what's called light painting. So for example, you could take like a white flashlight, just like a regular flashlight. And while that 10-second exposure is going off on the foreground, you could literally run that light, kind of paint the landscape with it. If you want to think about it, like see where your camera is pointed at the landscape and then physically move your flashlight throughout that entire area while that camera is exposing for 10 seconds. And what you'll notice is the foreground appears to be much more lit up in your photo. Some people love to do that, particularly if like you're getting a really cool foreground shot, like maybe you've got a really cool statue or something that you want to get in the foreground of your image. Shine a light on it while you're taking that foreground image. And then later, when you combine it with your Milky Way image in Lightroom or Photoshop or whatever you'd like to use, it will come out so much better because it will be actually bright enough to see, and you're not going to have to just, turn up the shadows in Lightroom and hope for the best. So expose it correctly the first time, and you will be happy later on. So yeah, take as many images as you can. But the main points here to take are: find a very, very dark location, go on new moon, bring a comfortable chair, bring a light, bring as many batteries as you have. Make sure you bring extra SD cards. You don't want to know how frustrating it is to drive 3 hours somewhere and only find out you don't have an SD card. That can be a nightmare. Side note, why don't all cameras, like all of them, have built-in memory at this point? Like, would it be that hard for Canon or Nikon to just put a 32 gigabyte built-in SSD in my camera? I don't think it would. But anyway, bring memory cards with you, bring extras of anything that you need, bring your tripod, get that camera set up when you get there, point it at the southern sky. Anytime after, 2 a.m. this time of year, you should be able to see it coming up. And as it gets later and later, closer to sunrise, it will get brighter and brighter. Take as many images as you can, and then the next day you can stack them in Lightroom. So we could talk about stacking another time. We're already, well past an hour. So I don't want to talk all night long about this, but I hope that gives you some ideas. Now, I did mention earlier about light pollution and how to contend with that. There is something called Exposed to the Right that you can look up on YouTube if you want to try to take Milky Way photos from highly light polluted areas. And essentially what it means is you want to expose the photo until your histogram is all the way to the right. And that makes the data easier to recover when you're processing it afterwards in something like Lightroom or Photoshop. But ETTR, or Exposed to the Right, if you want to give that a YouTube search, have a look. Again, me personally, if I want to shoot the Milky Way, I'm driving somewhere dark, because the only way to truly experience the Milky Way is to see it with your own eyes. So that's just me, and that's what I would recommend. Guys, thank you so much for tuning in this week. I am Rue. You have been listening to the Astrocast. I want to give a shout out to all of our Patreon members and supporters. If you would like to join and support the show, you can do that at patreon.com/the Astrocast. Let's see. Recommendations this week. I'm still listening to the J.R.R. Tolkien books. I can't really do anything. How about Common Side Effects? This is something everyone's been talking about in the cultural lexicon, and we just finished season 1 today. So if you don't know, Common Side Effects is a awesome show. It's available on Max, which is HBO essentially, and it's an animated series. Executive producer is Mike Judge. One of the main characters is voiced by the guy who did Hank Hill for years on King of the Hill. King of the Hill is actually coming back. Should be very soon. Very excited about that. But Common Side Effects is awesome. Highly recommend checking it out. It's only 10 episodes, about 20 minutes each, so you can binge it really quick. So go check that out. Thank you so much for tuning in this week and listening to the Astrocast. I'm your host, Rue. And as always, clear your skies.